And I had just seen her a couple months ago.
Okay, we ready to start?
Yes.
Flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Open Public Meetings Act Statement. New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of public bodies, at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Augusta, Branchville, Lafayette, and Sussex post offices, and notice sent to the New Jersey Herald, the Star Ledger, and the clerk of the boroughs of Branchville and Sussex, and the townships of Frankfort, Lafayette, and Wantage. Mission statement. High Point Regional High School, in partnership with staff, family, and community, is dedicated to the quest for individual excellence. By fostering high standards of achievement, we prepare students to become responsible and productive members of a diverse society. Roll call.
Mrs. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Ancliffe?
Here.
Mr. Dunn is not here. Mr. Kehoe?
Here.
Ms. Smith is not here. Mr. Morangi?
Here.
Ms. Sedona?
Here.
Mr. Carrazza is not here. Ms. Nugent?
Here.
That's all.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start off with Kathy, who's going to provide us with the ethics school officials.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, High Point. It's very nice to be back. And tonight's topic is school ethics. So I'm passing out a resource folder here, and just so that you know, I am your field service representative with School Boards Association. I work in all of Sussex County, and I'm a resource. I'm not, regulatory at all. So, our organization is pleased to help you out with any of your governance questions, any of your best practice questions. And one of our biggest hits is ethics training. We go to boards all over the place to do it. Admittedly, it can be a little dry. It's very important, but it is a little dry. So if you got questions, please ask me. I want you to get from this everything that you need. And this resource material is a great reference. So hang on to it, refer back to it as you need it. It's pretty much the same package that I gave out last year. There's not an awful lot new in school ethics, but it is important, and it's always a winner. And Jim, I have packets for those who are not here. If you do open your packet, though, one of the requirements statutorily and also part of CUSAC is that the board engages in a discussion of school ethics once a year. So in your folder, it is the second to last thing on the right side, right in front of the purple page, acknowledgement of receipt. If you sign that over and get that to Jim Mink, he'll have he'll have a reference that the board completed that requirement, which will be super. And then we'll kind of go right on into it.
Yes.
Pass this down for me, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
We got a purple one too.
Oh yes, the purple one is where you tell me what you really think of me and you don't sign it. So that's an important sheet of paper also. But in any case, so School Ethics Act, it's actually School Ethics Law.
I'm going to ask you to hold for 1 second,
Oh,
because we have another member walking in, so.
Oh, already.
Huh?
That's not him?
No.
Oh, wait, he's gonna get to
There were
the
two
restroom.
walking
Oh,
in.
two of them, all right.
All right.
Get the second to last sheet, well, he's got to sit down first.
Once a teacher, always a teacher.
I know.
In the back there, on the right side, right in front of the purple page, acknowledgement of receipt. I know you've seen this before. Sign it, get it to Jim, and we'll have a record that you guys participated in this discussion. So School Ethics Act is actually school ethics law, of course, and really what it is, it's the minimum standard that board members need to adhere to. This is the same for every district in the state, from the north to the south, everywhere in between. And it's handy because it does establish a baseline, right? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Kathy, by the way. It's nice to meet you. Hi. And Jim's got your packet for you. What we're doing is we're talking about the school ethics law today. And we just began. This is the first slide in the presentation. And we're just talking about how this is really the minimum standards for board members. And if you have any questions as we go through the program, by all means, interrupt me, ask me. I am very pleased
We
to
have them
help.
sign that second to last page?
Sure, absolutely. In the, on that side of the folder, right in front of this purple page here, if you don't mind signing this, you'll have a record that you took the training, which is important for the board. So basically, I could read all this to you, but I just want to point out a couple of things that are in the red type here. Really, what is the Ethics Act? Why do we even have one? Well, it's honestly, first of all, it's a great baseline, so everyone is held to the same standards, no matter what district you're from. I might go into Patterson, I might go into Lafayette, it's the same standards. Everyone has the same level of authority, the same job description, the same roles and responsibilities from district to district. But really, what is most valuable in probably the authors of the Act's eyes is that this establishes and tries to hold the respect and confidence of the constituents that you serve. And that's why it's important for us to, engage in these conversations annually, because this is how you do it. Again, like I said, this is the minimum standards. But what I'd also like to put your eyes towards are the last two red words, right? So down there, board members and school administrators, specifically the BA and the superintendent, must avoid contact in violation of their public trust or which creates a justifiable impression among the public that the trust is being violated. So even if you look down and closely adhere to the I's and the T's of the law, right, and you're square with it, but you're creating a justifiable impression that you're in violation of the Act. Technically, you may be in violation of the Act, so that's why I really do appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you guys all through about this. Being that it might be dry, but it's important to understand because we really do want to avoid those justifiable impressions, which can get you in as much trouble as actual violations, sometimes more, depending on the community you're in. But the Act itself is in your folder. It's this yellow one and all of its legalese. It's stapled. Every word of it is in there. Not going to read it to you, but you have it for your reference, and it is incumbent upon you to understand it. But we can break it down into what it actually established, and it's all these 5 bullet points here. The last two, the training requirements for board members, you're probably familiar with, and your BA will keep you apprised of. In your first year, you have to do Governance 1 training, second year Governance 2, third year Governance 3, fourth year, and every year of your next term that you're reelected to is a Governance 4 update. That's in here, and it's got to be through New Jersey School Boards. Your disclosure statements, they come from Trenton, you fill them out online, you send it back to them, that's it. So what we're going to focus on is the Ethics Commission itself, the Code of Ethics, and Conflicts of Interest. Because those are, let's see here, what did I do? Those are what really require the most conversation. If I can get the slide up. Oh. Having a little trouble with my slide. Okay, so let's just use the paper until Jim comes back and can help me out. Right, so let's talk about the ethics. Oh, I'm sorry, look at that awful graphic. The Ethics Commission, okay? This is the body that holds you accountable to staying in compliance with the Ethics Act, and it is made up of 9 members when it is fully staffed. They are appointed by the governor of New Jersey. And they're not fully staffed right now, there's a vacancy on it. But when the roster is full, you have 5 non-school officials on there, people who have nothing to do with public school governance or running a school. or school district, 2 school board members, and 2 school administrators. Right now, there is a vacancy in the school board member slot. There's only 1 school board member on the commission. Only 1 person who sits where you sit. Only 1 person who has that school board member point of view. So I think that's very interesting, and it's very telling to see that the largest component of the Ethics Commission are non-school officials. You know, John Q. Public and Jane Q. Public, right? So it's just kind of something to keep in mind as we go through. So what does the Act do? Well, they do 2 things as far as keeping you, making sure that school board members are in compliance with the Act. And one is that they issue advisory opinions, and the second is that they hear and decide on ethics complaints. Couple of major differences between the 2. Advisory opinions are when you want some clarification on action that the board or a fellow board member or yourself are either engaged in currently or are about to take. If you're about to take a course of action and you're not quite sure you should be doing it, because if you read all through that Act, and as we go through this presentation, you'll know it's not always clear, right? Ethics should be black and white, right? Ethics, but it's not. There's a lot of nuance to it, more so than most people would like. So in that case, it calls for guidance. Where do you go? Well, I'm not an attorney, but I'm happy to serve as a resource for you. I'm very immersed in Ethics Act decisions and advisory opinions and all of that stuff. We also urge you to go to your board attorney. You call your board president or your superintendent and funnel the question through them to your board attorney. Your board attorney is an excellent source on advice for this. But on occasion, you may need to go to the source itself, which is the Ethics Commission. It's as simple as writing a letter. It doesn't cost anything. It's not a special form. They've got a website in the Department of Education's website. Write to that address. As long as they get it, like I think 2 weeks before their next meeting, they'll discuss it at their next meeting. They meet monthly in Trenton, and they'll say, yep, you're good, or no, you need to change your ways. If you can only ask for one, though, about your particular board, about yourself, or about a fellow board member. And if you're asking about a fellow board member, you have to show that you've alerted the fellow board member that you're asking about him or her. So you can't ask about another district like Cedar Grove or Wildwood or something like that. It has to be about High Point. And once the advice is issued, it's never punitive, right? It's just either change course or you're good. There's never any kind of penalty involved with it. And if the advice that the commission issues, if the question was good enough, and that answer might come up in other places, right? The commission may decide to put that advice on its website and make the advisory opinion public. And in that case, you'll see it on the Department of Education's website, the School Commission, Ethics Commission's section there, but the details will be scrubbed from it. Like there won't be individual board members' names or the individual district, so it'll be kind of generalized. But what's good about that is it serves as a resource for other boards, and we rely on it to advise board members on which way to go on particular issues or conflicts of interest that may arise. Oh, Jim, I'm sorry, I don't know why I cannot advance through this thing. Would you kind of help me? I'm so sorry. I just need to get to the next one. I don't know what I did.
Oh.
Thought I was being good. But, oh, here's
Always
this.
doing these.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's see. All right, so ethics complaints on the bottom there. All right, that's when the horse has left the barn. That's a past action. And anyone can file an ethics complaint. Does not need to be someone on your board, does not need to be a board member, can be anyone. Could be a fellow board member, could be a staff member, could be a member of the public, could be someone from out of town. Anyone could file an ethics complaint. And once that's filed, it's a lot more detailed. Generally, you get attorneys involved, so there's not quite a speedy resolution to it the way there is with an advisory opinion. And when the commission examines it and does all of its, oh Jim, what am I doing with this? I am so, I'm so sorry. All right, well, that's perfect. No, the one with all the colors. Thank you, okay. All right, so once there is, if the SEC determines that there is a violation of the act, as it says right there, there is a penalty involved, and there's different degrees of severity, right? It starts on the low end with a reprimand, which is kind of just a letter that says, you know, that wasn't very good between you and the Ethics Commission. Censure's a little bit more of a slap on the wrist, where the board president has to read a notice that you've been censured at the board table so everybody knows, and then you forget about it and do your stuff. And suspension's a little bit more. The Ethics Commission does have the ability to suspend you from a certain amount of months of service if they see fit, all the way up to removal. They recommend these, technically they recommend these to the commissioner, and the commissioner signs off on it. But those are the penalties that are involved. They're not monetary, they're embarrassing, and they can cause some disruption in service, but that's what we're looking at.
And there's no prison time, right?
Asking for a friend.
Interestingly, I've also been subject of an advisory opinion.
Really?
That was published, that was,
Interesting, okay, well,
I
You're a
read an
leader.
interesting one.
well, you know what, you're helping people out then.
Yes, I am.
Because that advisory opinion is public and.
Yeah, now
public
everybody
reports
knows
are
how to
all
proceed.
over. There you go, it's a beautiful thing, right? I will tell you- Well, I'll tell you, they do have like a monetary penalty, a $500 penalty if you file a frivolous complaint.
Oh,
That doesn't come up very often, and when it does, it's like super egregious. Like, it's like
Yeah.
the same dude who keeps filing over on the same people, and all. That person might get a $500 penalty. But the subject of the complaint
Yeah.
does not. So I guess we can all,
good.
yeah, I guess we can all breathe a little easier. Now let me see if I can, oh, look at that.
Well
Okay.
done, well done.
All right, thank you, thank you. So also in your packet, I believe on the right side, in brown with a lovely border on it, it looks so pretty, is the Code of Ethics, which is part of the School Ethics Act. And when violations are filed, you know, ethics complaints are filed, typically it's alleged that you violated one of these subsections. So we're gonna go over them in detail a little bit more, but to kind of bring it to the whole situation to life, we're relying on the misdeeds of another board, two board members in particular from nowhere around here, okay? What happened was, these very passionate board members, I'm not questioning their motives at all, I don't, you know, I'm not familiar with the people or the actual inner workings of the district, but these two board members were told by a constituent, or tipped off, that I believe one of their administrators, I think it was the director of special services, was working in another district, which is completely against their policy, which is unethical, blah, blah, blah. So this concerned these two board members, and what they decided to do, when they were given that information, is to investigate and to see if that was the case or not. So they went all through, I'm not quite sure what process they followed, but these two board members determined that, yeah, this person was working in another district, they had this kind of evidence, they could prove it, and then they went to the superintendent and said, something is wrong here. The superintendent said, no, that's actually not the case, disproved it. They did not believe the superintendent. They went to the county prosecutor, reported the administrator, reported the superintendent, and in the midst of all this shenanigans, an ethics complaint was filed against the two of them. And they were found to have been in violation of subsection C, D, E, G, I, and J. Yeah. It's on the website, and these things, by the way, all the ethics complaints go on the website. They are not scrubbed. Names, districts, findings, it's all on there. It makes for very interesting reading. You will also notice a lot of times when people file these complaints, they throw a bunch of letters out there and see what sticks. In this case, a lot of times the commission picks them all off. Nope, 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 nope. This time, all of those stuck. So let's go through these little subsections here and see what they're talking about. And you know what, it's probably best not to even look at this to a punitive standpoint, but actually I like to say that the Code of Ethics, I know it sounds corny, but it is really a board member's best friend. As long as you stay in line with these, you are good, right? You are good. And it also gets you out of a lot of sticky situations. So, but if you have questions on it, let me know. So, all right, A, okay, easy. you uphold all laws. The State Board of Education tells you to do something, you do it. The court tells you to do something, you do it, right? That one's pretty easy. B, I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children. That's why you are on the board. If you're mostly interested in the tax levy, you're not in the right role. I'm not saying the tax levy is not part of your job. It absolutely is, to make sure that you can fund the education that you wish to provide for your children. That's in line with your vision for the district. But you are here to make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children. And also, my favorite word in that is actually a three-letter, all children, right? That meets the needs of all children, regardless of who they are, what they can do, how they identify themselves, what they believe in. You're here for all of them. It's as simple and as complicated as that, okay? It's a big one, it's big. That really is your overarching role. But how do you perform that role? Well, subsection C fills that out. There's a lot of things you can do to support children in their, as they pursue their education, but as a board member, your unique job, your swim lane, is spelled out right here. It's policy making, planning, and appraisal. That's what you do. You will also help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. This is kind of interesting because that really dovetails in, I think, a lot with the Open Public Meetings Act, because you have public commentary, as you notice. You need to have that, right? Not only does that keep you in line with OPMA, but that takes, that takes into account this subsection here, right? That's why a lot of boards have a public commentary for agenda items only. So your public has a chance to give you feedback on what you're about to vote on. And you don't have to respond to and go back and forth with the people at the microphone, but you do take into account what they say, and you use those points of view to inform your vote. It's important for that, so that keeps you in line with subsection C. I'm already talking a lot. I'm wondering if you guys have any questions so far. Okay. So if you look at that don't there, I mean, really, you don't become involved in administrating your policies, or organizing the schools, or implementing any of your programs or policies. That's what your administration does. But that's okay, because honestly, policy making, planning, and appraisal, I think is a really good gig, and you can do a lot of good with it, and I'm sure you do. D leads right on beautifully after C, and you've probably heard this already if you've gone to any school board stuff. Wayne's nodding, Wayne's heard it a million times, because I know you go to a lot of these gigs. You do not run the schools, you see to it that they are well run. No board members, especially those two that I was talking about, very passionate about their district, but there are certain things that administration does and certain things that board members do. And administration administers. We are the visionaries, we are the policymakers. We appraise, but we don't administer, okay? So to kind of look a little bit closer at our case study, they were found to be in violation of C because clearly what they were doing, these two, was not related to any kind of policy making or planning or appraisal. I mean, getting involved with personnel, first of all, like that, it's an audit, it really screams D violation, right? They really went crazy and actually did an investigation. And they also had a problem with D because they didn't report to the superintendent. They just decided, well, we've got a responsibility to our constituent, and we're not going to follow the chain of command. We are just going to go off into someone else's job responsibilities because we care, because we're concerned. I'm sure that sounds good as you're doing it, and you can convince yourself that you're doing the right thing, but that's where you have to stop and look at the Ethics Act. It's not your role. It wasn't their role, and they were called on it, these two. E as in eagle. This is the most popular, the most violated subsection of the Code of Ethics in my experience. It's really something. E as in eagle. And this is, there's a couple things to keep in mind here. One is that authority, the first part, authority rests with the Board of Education, okay? Another thing you'll hear a lot of school board things, I've probably even said it here before myself, is your authority is only confined to the board table. Once you get up and leave the board table, when you're in the supermarket, when you're in the parking lot, when you're in church or whatever it is, you are the same as any other member of this community. You have no authority until you are seated on the dais and you're voting on action items. That's where your authority rests. So consequently, you can't go and represent yourself as the Board of Education, and sometimes people will do that. In particularly egregious cases, they may guarantee someone a job. Oh, yeah, the board would love to hire you. Submit your resume. We'll do it, you know. No, that's not for a board member to do. The authority is with the Board of Education, right? Not with the individual. When you're voting on particular items, and you're casting your vote, that's where your authority lies. You contribute to the conversation, you inform yourself, you make sure that you have all the information you need to make an informed vote that's in the best interest of all the children that you're serving. But that's that, you know, that's kind of that. F, this one I'm not going to spend too much time on. Obviously, you don't make yourself a shill for anybody, right? Well, no matter what the organized group is. And G is real interesting, right? It's really, it's no leaks, right? Just keep confidential information confidential. This is surprisingly violated all the time. Not quite sure why, but if something goes on in the executive session, you need to keep it in executive session. If your superintendent shares a memo with you that says confidential on it, it's confidential. When you discuss the evaluation of the superintendent, all those proceedings stay in the room. It is very important that confidentiality is honored, because once it's broken, doesn't, you know, whether or not there's an ethics charge filed against you or not, it really is damaging to the board. It's difficult for the board to do its work under conditions where information's leaking out to, you know, to different individuals who may take that information and try to run with it or misinterpret it. I mean, it doesn't belong to them. That information belongs to the board. It's very important. Okay. So good old G, our pals, they definitely violated G. We know that because they were flaunting all this personnel records in front of the prosecutor and their constituent and all that stuff. So that obviously wasn't cool. And of course, E, you know, obviously they were taking things beyond their scope of authority. And that's where the county prosecutor came in. So here we have it in red that independent action that has the potential to compromise a board. When you see violations of E, they generally come down to that. Like the board member might say, well, nothing really happened or this or that, but if it has the potential to compromise the board, that's difficult. When someone goes on Facebook and starts saying things about the district or how they think the district is going to act or how the board is going to decide something or something that the board would never do, you know, that has the potential to compromise the board, and that needs to be avoided at all costs. We'll also talk about, you know, making problems for doing business in a good way. Okay, H, I love H. I'll vote to appoint the best qualified personnel after the consideration of the recommendation of your superintendent, right? Your superintendent is the educational leader of this district. They are the most qualified person to make personnel decisions. So we don't have to do that ourselves. So we have the confidence in our administrators after we've hired them. The most important job of the board, right, is to hire the right person. Second most is to evaluate them. So you know that you've got the right person captaining the ship. And when they bring you personnel recommendations, you can feel a measure of confidence in what they've brought to you. If you have questions on the names that they are bringing forward to you, you can certainly ask, why is this person the right person for our district? But it's not really incumbent upon you at all to, you know, ask for, you know, sit in on job interviews or ask for a resume or this or that. Really, that's not our purview. We're lay people, and we rely on our superintendent's expertise. Doesn't mean you have to vote yes for everything, but you have to be very careful not to be arbitrary or capricious if you're going to vote a superintendent's recommendation down. Another great thing about this is it prevents people from saying, oh, you know, thanks, superintendent, for your recommendation, but my daughter-in-law's cousin is really the man for the job, right? So we don't have any of that, and it kind of keeps order. And I love I, right? I will support and protect school personnel in proper performance of their duties. And the reason why I love I is because, like you, I was a school board member, and it just got me out of so many awful conversations. Because once you are a school board member, you're not looked at the same way that you were beforehand. You always have that word on your forehead, BOE, right, board member, and people who don't understand our role, which is absolutely forgivable, doesn't make them a bad citizen or uninformed or anything. It's kind of esoteric what we do, really, but people think that we are the people to go to voice complaints about a coach or a teacher or a director or something like that, or even the very least of it, when you'll hear that cocktail party chat, or you go in the corner and people are trying to get you into a conversation about a particular member of personnel. And you can rely on the Ethics Act and say, I'm so sorry, but as a board member, this is not my place. I really can't participate in this. And that's where you lead people through the chain of command. Because as a board member, we're not administering anything, right? So what we need to do, oh, Jim, I did it again. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. What do I need to do? What did you do? Oh, don't worry. Well, in any case, follow the chain of command, basically, was our last one. So if you have any kind of, if you yourself have a complaint, or someone's complaining to you, has a concern, has an issue, if it's about a certain teacher, and you have approached the teacher already, the person has approached the teacher, next step up is the principal. Next step up may be a particular director or the superintendent, for the last stop on the chain of command really is the Board of Education. And when I say the Board of Education, I mean the Board of Education, not just an individual board member. Okay, so that's why you can easily remove yourself from those conversations. It requires a little finesse because people don't quite understand what we do, but if you do help them to help direct them through the chain of command, you're setting everybody in good stead. I'm wondering if you guys have any questions about any of that business? Okay. All right, so we got more examples of bad behavior. Okay, couple of bullet points. Someone who goes to the principal, these are all actual cases. Someone went to the principal over a personal matter and visited the school, just kind of barged in, and they were...
The principal had to get medical attention?
This was a really bad one, yeah. She was pregnant too. We cornered her in an elevator, I think.
Oh, I heard about
Yeah, it was
that.
out of Pleasantville. It was awful.
Yes.
It was awful. I mean, that paragraph does not do that complaint justice. It's like 15 pages long. It's riveting reading. Pleasantville in Atlantic County.
And it did result in the suspension of the board member?
It did. At first,
Because I
the
heard
commission
at
tried
first
to
it wasn't, yeah.
well, at first the commission tried to suspend them for longer, but the commissioner
Oh,
said,
okay.
oh, well, they've never, I think it was, they've never been in trouble before, so they
Right,
suspend them
right,
for 60 days. And that guy is on the town council now. They're not a school board member anymore, but they were elected to town council. It's awful, awful. Ran into the gym, used the N-word on everybody. It was no good, okay? So seriously, now those made for some juicy newspapers, believe me. Okay, 2 members attended a site visit. Okay, couple of problems here. Just showing up at the school as a site visit, that's outside your purview as a board member. You can't, as much as you may want to or feel that you have a need to or an interest in showing up at the school. Whether it's to check out the new computers or make sure that the athletic fields are good or make sure that the new generation science standards are being taught, it's not your role as a board member. That's not you. So you don't do a site visit unannounced. If you really have an interest in visiting the school, what do you think you should do? I will answer it. You should ask the superintendent. You should call your superintendent and mention that you'd really like to see how things are functioning in the library, now that new lighting has been installed, blah, 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 blah. And you'll either get a yes or a no. But probably the best thing is for the superintendent to say, well, that's an interesting thing, let's bring it to the board table and we'll all discuss to see if everybody wants to see it. And then we'll arrange for a time where everyone can see our wonderful new lighting that we've installed, or our makerspace, or this or that. So, because honestly, the more information that the board has, it's not just unique to one member, the better off the full board is. So that's another thing to consider when you're thinking about just showing up at a school, why it's not a good idea. And these two members decided to tell the assistant superintendent that they're a shoo-in for another job. So that's, that wasn't good. And so they got a censure for that. A member requested a rice notice to be sent to the interim superintendent. There's a problem there. Only the board president can rice the superintendent, whether they're interim or not. And then there was just a whole bunch of mess there. That's interesting. That was out of West New York. It was all in the newspapers. You can read up about that when you have a chance. But that was E for Eagle they were in violation of. And this last one, I am not sure which case this came from because this comes up all the time. Board member requested favors of his child's principal and ignored the rules placed on other parents. I wish I could say I knew exactly which one this is from, but there are so many of them out there, it's not even funny. And that's just bad news. And that person was cited for D, trying to run the schools, not see that they were, and they got a reprimand. So I mean, look at these penalties. They're just really, except for the first guy, they're really pretty low level if you think about it. Any questions on that business, the code of ethics, or all of that stuff, and we'll kind of breeze through conflicts of interest and all that. Okay. So in the law, it spells out all of the reasons why you may need to recuse yourself from the vote. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't sit on the school board. You can't sit on the school board if you work in the school. That's one blanket restriction. But for most other things, if there's some kind of a conflict, you just need to recuse yourself from the discussion, and certainly from the vote. So some of these are pretty obvious: a business interest, a gift, financial involvement, etc., etc. I'm going to kind of go through this stuff. But what I want you to think about as we're talking about conflicts are two things. So let me go back a little bit. Sorry. That yellow part, the bottom there, the SEC definition of immediate family. There's two definitions that we need to know. Discussion. I know, it's good to see you. Immediate family member or a relative. So an immediate family member is a spouse or a dependent child who lives in your household, okay? It's not your mom or your dad, it's your spouse or a dependent child who lives in your household. Relative is a much larger definition. All of these, it's all spelled out here, goes from, your half-sister to your niece, your nephew, your parent, your grandfather, all that business, whether they're related to you or your spouse, okay? By blood, marriage, or adoption. So that's a very wide-ranging definition. And the reason why we keep those, damn it, I am so sorry. What am I doing here? Okay. Jim, will you want to just stand next to me, or are you wearing a Fitbit? Like, are you getting your steps in here?
Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay.
It seems like every time you hit escape, it will go back.
Oh, it will go back to where I want to?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Let's hope I don't have to hit escape, but that's the first thing I'm going to do that before I say Jim. Okay, and the reason why we want to know these definitions is because you can't hire a relative, big definition of yourself or your superintendent, to work in the district unless you get a waiver, a special consideration from the executive county superintendent, and sometimes that does happen in remote districts like Long Beach Island. If they're looking to hire like a chemistry teacher, high school chemistry, they can't find somebody, but somebody's half brother will do it, they might get a waiver, and sometimes they do. Kenny and the superintendent can even recommend the broad definition, the relative. Now sometimes you will have somebody who's working in there and and you're elected to the board, and that's okay, and that's perfectly fine. If they're appointed while you're not on the board, you just need to sit out certain discussion items, right? So let's talk about that. If you have a relative or certainly an immediate family member, or others, right? Others can include an ex-spouse or something like that. Your attorney will know the answer to that. The SEC will certainly be happy to clarify for you if you have a question on what others are. They'll issue an advisory opinion for you. But if you've got one of those, someone belonging to you who works in the district, you do not take part in any kind of, anything that involves your superintendent. Any kind, you know, for instance, his evaluation, which you are about to do, right? Anything that's spelled out here. Also, when it comes to collective bargaining and negotiating with the union, there's a handy chart that's here, and we took it right out of the School Ethics Commission's decision, advisory opinion A2417, so it's accessible on their website. But this lovely chart will tell you right here. So if you've got someone who is, and anyone belonging to you works in the district, you're completely out of negotiations from start to finish. If you have a relative, right, who, or an immediate, well, let's start with the immediate family member. An immediate family member who works out of the district, right, who works in, I don't know, Verona, right? You do not participate, or if you're a teacher and you work somewhere else, you do not participate in negotiations with the union in this local district until the memorandum of agreement is reached, the salary guide is reached, all the compensation package is reached and is before the board, then you're back in. Then you can cast that final vote. If you have that broad definition, a relative who works outside of the district, so if your nephew happens to work in Pompton Lakes and is a teacher there, you're fine. You're in from start to finish. This was not always the case. This kind of changed, went back and forth. I know, Wayne, you remember this too. Yeah, and it affected a lot of people. So the Ethics Commission actually backtracked on an earlier, more restrictive decision. But this is taken from the latest advice from them. You'll see that we have asterisks there, right? What are the asterisks? Absent another conflict. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you don't have any other of these particular, here's a couple of things that were cited by the Ethics Commission, any other kind of possible conflicts. And sometimes these are very fact-specific, so if you're concerned that there may be a conflict, we absolutely advise you to get in touch with your school board attorney, where they can help walk you through this. But the most popular reason for that asterisk is that third bullet point there, the immediate family member or the relative, the big definition, who works in another district, has heightened union involvement if they are on their union's negotiations team, if they're president of their local teachers union or secretary or something like that, that will likely recuse you from voting. Okay, that creates a conflict for you. That's what we call heightened union involvement. 1018, I'm glad that that's in your packet. You should read that decision, it's fascinating. And it's about a board member who was running unopposed. They were on their board's negotiations committee. And the local union wasn't too fond of this board member and offered their endorsement and offered money to the candidate, who turned them down, of course. When the candidate was reelected, because there was no one else on the ballot, right? The union said, oh, it's too bad, you know, you're off in negotiations. I'm simplifying. Because, you know, we wanted you to win. We told our members about how great you are. We endorsed you, so you're not on negotiations anymore. Isn't that a shame? And so the person wrote to the Ethics Commission and said, am I not, I mean, seriously? And they said, nah, you can participate. Because when you do, I mean, the standard is if you receive a formal endorsement, if you take contributions from the teachers union, or even if you have a larger administrative union, any kind of union, you are out of negotiations for a year. So they were trying to do that.
That's pretty clever.
Or actually, you're out of negotiations and the next day,
Yeah.
yeah, I know, I was kind of wondering
That's
if
pretty
somebody was
clever,
going to
but
do
yeah.
that. And it just happened last year, right? In 2018, they made that decision. Fascinating. Didn't go their way. Very
They didn't
interesting.
have to publicly disavow the endorsement, or?
It got a little complicated because the board members said, please, you know, I don't want your endorsement, don't do it. But they printed in their literature what could have been read as an endorsement for their internal membership. They didn't really promulgate it much. And so they were like, it's not even really it was all sorts of back and forths, but in the end, the board member prevailed, which I think is the proper course of action. Doctrine of necessity, I'm not really going to talk about too much because, I mean, if you're not affected by it, that's really boring. But volunteerism is kind of interesting because a few years ago, there were no restrictions on board members volunteering in the schools. But, as is often the case, there was some bad behavior by a board member. Someone filed either an ethics complaint, or they asked for an advisory opinion. I think it was an advisory opinion, excuse me. And the Ethics Commission said, whoa, no, this particular type of volunteerism is a little bit too in the weeds, so they set up parameters for board members to follow. Which, when you think about it, are really not such a bad thing, because you do want to keep your nose clean. Remember that justifiable impression you want to avoid of being in violation of the Ethics Act? And the big thing there is the whole D, subsection D, where you avoid administering the schools, but seeing to it that they are well run. So we don't want to look like we're administering the schools at all or getting involved in anything like that. So basically what you can keep in mind is one-time infrequent visits, like coming into the school every once in a while to, especially in the younger grades, like reading on Dr. Seuss Day or chaperoning on field trips or something like that would be fine. There's really not a problem with that. And there's also not any kind of a problem with being a volunteer for an outside organization that may use the schools or that has a lot of kids in their clubs, like the Rec Commission or the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or something like that. Or the PTA, really, or the HSA, that's a completely separate organization, so you can volunteer as much as you like for that. But what you do need to be mindful of, you can't handle any kind of money that's belonging to the district, you're out of that. But you need to look at that second one under violation, regular contact with students, parents, and staff. That's what you have to avoid. So with some of the younger grades, I mean, being an everyday playground chaperone, can't do that anymore, or helping the kids get off the bus every day. I know that was a popular it still is a popular volunteer role for parents, but board members really shouldn't be doing that. But any kind of thing that gives you the appearance of being, in quotes there, enmeshed in the building, that came from the decision itself. If you seem to be a part of the day-to-day operations of the district, if someone comes in and it's Wednesday and you're there because it's Wednesday, the board, helping out, but you're a board member, that's giving the impression that you are very perilously close to D. And you don't want that, so it's outside of your role. You can't, and it says here volunteer coaches, club advisors, blah, blah, but that's for the district. So if you are the, CYO basketball coach, that's fine. But if you're the High Point basketball coach, that's a problem.
When you say it's perilously close to D, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm
That's
so
okay.
used to ethics act. I talk in ethics language, and it makes me even more fun of a person than I actually am. Interview committees, they are frowned upon. I don't know if you guys do them, but not for the superintendent, of course, because the whole board hires the superintendent, but for any kind of position other than that, the Ethics Commission strongly discourages that, because it really doesn't speak to your role as a board member, right? Policy making or planning or appraisal, it's not really there. But it's an interesting opinion, 412. They go on and on about how much they hate it, but then they say, but if you do this, you're probably okay. So these narrow circumstances that are subject to approval of the superintendent. So if the superintendent says it's okay, you can do it. But we're talking like 1 or 2 board members, they can't ask any questions, they're just observers, that sort of thing. But your best practice really kind of comes down to that whole thing where we were talking about your superintendent really is the educational leader of your district, the captain of the ship, knows personnel. So most boards don't engage in that kind of behavior anyway. What's interesting too about exit interviews, to contrast that with the other opinions on interview committees that went on and on, exit interviews was a solid no exit interviews. that was determined to be a violation of D. That's too close to the day-to-day of the district. If you want to have an exit interview with a departing superintendent, that's fine with the Ethics Commission, but not with a teacher or an administrator. Any questions on any of that stuff? Okay, so in conclusion, you're probably familiar with, maybe not so much the new members, but seasoned members certainly are familiar with our school board notes that comes to you electronically through email. It also comes in mail. And if there's any kind of updates to school ethics or cases you should know about or new advisory opinions, we will put in school board notes. And again, talk to your board attorney if you have detailed questions. I'm happy to be a resource. Your board attorney is the penultimate best source, the ultimate best source being the Ethics Commission itself for matters of school ethics. And, you know, that first bullet point, we do recommend that you talk to your family members, make sure that they don't have any heightened union involvement, and find out where they work, and keep a list so that every time you go into negotiations, you'll kind of know where you're at, and who can be part of your negotiations committee and who needs to recuse himself on particular votes. And that's kind of the story on ethics. I am just wondering if there's any questions that I didn't answer that you have about school ethics that are coming to you now. And I know you have new members, you don't know what you don't know just yet, but I'm always available. But are there any things that you were looking to find out about tonight that I didn't address? And I will be back in future months to talk about the Open Public Meetings Act, so we'll talk about those particular requirements.
And are we doing goal setting with you?
Yeah,
setting
that's,
is cool.
yep, that's much more fun. I promise. But I thank you very much for having me and for your attention throughout the whole presentation. And hold on to your packets, it's got a lot of good materials in it. And again, I'm always happy to help out. So give me a jingle, my card's in there. I'm always happy to help out. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks,
Really
Kathy.
appreciate it.
All right. If you want to fill out your purple papers, put them face
Oh,
down.
that's right,
Yeah.
purple tape.
Evaluation.
Not as boring as she said.
I didn't find it boring, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you. See,
I thought you
I love
did
this
well.
stuff, Anthony, but I
yes.
know what kind
Oh,
of
okay.
geek I am, so.
All right, no problem. That's all right.
That's the rationale.
Gotcha.
It's just attachment G5.
Oh, okay.
I have extra packets, I don't know. if
Oh,
anybody got
okay,
one or if
okay.
you want to just hold on to them, but.
Okay,
All right.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your technical assistance. I'm so
Sure.
sorry for all
No,
the
not at all,
calisthenics
not at
you
all.
had to perform, but I appreciate it.
Still rolling?
Still rolling, right?
Do you have to videotape us walking through the hallway?
Shut it off.
We're gonna convene in a minute and then reconvene in the cafeteria. Okay, if everybody's done, then we're gonna stop recording and, all right, we're reconvening, the session now. And we're gonna start off, Kathy Heller from the New Jersey School Board has finished her ethics training. The next item is any unfinished business. Any unfinished business? Not seeing any? Approval of the minutes. Regular meeting minutes, April 30th, and the executive session minutes, of April 30th.
So moved.
Second. Roll call?
Mr. Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Moranci?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn? Yes. Ms. Smith is not here. Mr. Crosby?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Tadona?
Yes.
Mr. Keough?
Yes. Public comments. These are for agenda items only. We ask anybody who comes up to make a public comment, give their name and address. And in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, we will open the public comments for agenda items only at this time. Each speaker should state his or her name and address. We'll have 3 minutes to address the board, which will be timed by the board president for designated. We will limit this session to no longer than 45 minutes. Please be respectful and mindful that your comments are being recorded. Do we have anybody who wants to make a public comment? Seeing nobody making a public comment, we'll move on to the next session. Presentations. The student council is not present today. Okay. Seeing Laura Weiss having not attending the meeting today, we'll pass on the student council report. The HPEA, Ms. Mancuso, something's come up, she's not able to make it, so she's not going to give a presentation today.
She yielded her time to me.
She yielded her time. So we'll move on to the principal's report.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Just like to talk about many of the events that are going on, have gone on, will be going on in the next several weeks. First and foremost, we had our senior scholarship dinner. So you were able to attend last week. We had over $123,000 donated and given by the community to over 80 seniors. 62 overall donors from the community, many new ones this year, so we're very excited about that. That was a great opportunity for our seniors and a great night for them.
John, I'm sorry, I was writing, but I want to know how many kids got.
83.
83. That was amazing.
83.
That's amazing.
So that's grown, Ms. Anderson, from when it first started as their 12th year, I think about 50 or so, a little bit less students that got the scholarships, about 83, which is now. It continues to kind of grow each year, based on the amount of scholarships that are available, and it's grown every year as well.
It was great, and when Bill Keough and I walked out to have the picture taken with our recipient, Anna Chang, when she came back into them, she goes, "This is such an honor." I mean, the kids, it means so much to them. I love that night. And
Really
thank you
nice-
for doing such a
nice
good job
meeting
and
night, too.
your crew.
Yes, thank you to Janet and Karen, guidance department. They're the ones that do a lot of coordination behind the scenes and a lot of logistics. We're at a new site this year, so that was always undertaking for a new location. That was very well done. Appreciate the community support. We also had the next night, foreign language national.
Again, before you move on, I want to echo what Debbie said. You really did a masterful job, and I think what the school does, put together for the kids, is a great event. It really, it's amazing what it means to the kids and their parents.
Absolutely.
And they've earned it after 4 years.
Absolutely. And
The
they're really good.
sad part is there's somebody that earned it did and weren't able to get it.
Yeah. And one of the things that we heard over and over again, right, many times, is how difficult it was this year for many of the donors to choose somebody.
Yes.
Heard that many times. And the fact that also the scholarships were increased a little bit because they were able to fundraise more this year. So that was two nice benefits.
Yeah, there were big bucks this time. For some of them, yeah.
All right, so we also had our Foreign Language National Honor Society ceremony, which is the following night. Had about over 30 students that were inducted across the languages for that, so it was a nice night as well. Tomorrow we have our 8th grade picnic. I'm sure Kevin will talk a little about testing, things like that. We have our 8th grade picnic. We're welcoming all of our 8th grade students in. Mrs. Frisbee coordinates that, and she's done a job. There's a long litany of other assistants that goes into that, but she's the head counselor that coordinates that. We're looking forward to that day. It's going to be 10 to 1. And we'll have our peer leaders that are working to be able to assist with the groups throughout the day. They do a lot of icebreakers, relationship building, get to know each other, activities, meet a lot of extracurricular advisors, clubs, things that they can be aware of. Again, one of our stages of the 9th grade transition program is now this is our final meet and greet before they come in on their half day, 9th grade day in September. So we're excited about that. It's really going to be at that point 5 steps in the transition from November till following September for them. It's a really important part of their transition. Tomorrow night we have the Social Studies Road Kaplan National Honor Society at 7 o'clock in the Media Center. The following night to that we have the Art National Honor Society on the 23rd at 6 o'clock. We usually do that here. June 7th we have our senior trip. We have over 165 seniors signed up for the trip, which is exciting. We're going for the first time to Great Adventure for they call it senior night. We have never been able to go there before. Many schools have said it's a great night. The time if you're looking for it is 9 to 1. It's 9 o'clock at night to 1 o'clock in the morning. They close the park to seniors only, and they do events, food, music, all kinds of stuff. The rides are open as well. Some of the rides are open as well for them, so we're excited about that. So we'll be coming back about 2 o'clock. Hopefully all good, but it's going to be a good night for them, and again, lots of students that are signed up for that. Some student news: we had our construction and manufacturing students. You may have seen that posted on social media and also throughout the email that was last week, Wednesday. We had the opportunity, myself, Mr. Gonzalez, to go down to Mercer County Tech, which is not close to that point. And we went down there and enjoyed the time with our construction and manufacturing students and their parents, and they're honored as a state board recognition for their awards, and their inventor was the category that they were in. It was really nice to see those students, because those students, some are going to college, some are not going to college, they're going into the trade, and they work with the concrete competition that we talked about before, and they designed 2 different benches that their pride is just through the roof with. One of the best quotes, I think, as we read kind of through their litany a little bit, is when they're asked at the construction and manufacturing concrete competition, how much do you think it's worth? These are beautiful pieces of furniture with concrete and cherry, and just really well done. They said, I can't put a price on it because it means too much to us. So both of those pieces of furniture are in their houses, at their homes, and they kind of share that opportunity. They're not willing to sell it because there's so much product that. So great to see those students recognized at that award, and there was a dozen or 15 other schools that were recognized as well. And really, I think that our students really stood out and were applauded by a lot of the state board of education gurus, for lack of a better term, on their ideas and their concepts of creativity and their design. So that was great for Mr. Gonzalez and his students as well. Our whale watch trip was this weekend. One of the, if not probably the most spoken about trip from our students when they sit at NHS induction ceremonies, where they talk about what means the most to them, is the whale watch trip. And they went this weekend, had good weather, came back on Saturday night. So thank you to Becky Sarno and many teachers that attended that trip, as well as a large group. We had in the last month our superintendent roundtable was Julian Mangano. That was a great night with Dr. Ripley, a great day with Dr. Ripley and Julian's family. We got a chance to see her outside of school and talk a little bit about her. Her grandmother was also there, and a very proud moment as well. When you sit with families like that, and you sit with parents and grandparents, it's pretty amazing, to have these conversations and talk about the value of education and how proud they are of their, in this case, granddaughter. Really nice conversation with them. Today I had the opportunity to go to Sussex County Community College for a brief moment. Sussex County Council Association, our president is Joanne Koch, our counselor, has been for many years. They choose every year, and have been doing it for probably about 10 years or more, a caring student recipient from every high school in the county. And when you go to these award ceremonies, the scholarship dinner, those are all fantastic. But as you heard me say, then it's not about the money or the accolades or the GPA or AP scores and AP tests. It's who you are as a person. And the Caring Student Award recognizes one high school senior from each high school in the county for just that, being a great person, caring for the student body, being a role model. This year just with Ray K. And you could say great things about Ray K. and his leadership, and his compassion, his kindness. He was our recipient and very well deserved for sure. Another student event coming up, which is really almost completely led, is our STEM Community Fair. That's June 3rd. That will be in the East Gym. That's led by our Science National Honor Society students and also Mr. Baker. It's really a great event. It's from 5 to 7 o'clock. If you haven't had a chance to attend it, it is for middle school students, and it's all student-led. There's about 25 different activities, from hovercraft to bootleg to all kinds of stuff. And it's all designed by the students, and it's hands-on activities, and our students really enjoy being the teachers and that moment as well, so it's a great thing. Also, in the last month, we had the GOE, Governor's Education of the Year award ceremony in Lafayette as well, and that was for Jesse Stroud and Ed Levins. An honor to be with them both and receive their award. And there was 94, I think, recipients throughout the county that were recognized at that. So nice thing to see, again, recipients from other schools and kind of connect the dots a little bit as well. So congratulations to them. Last but certainly not least, our end of year schedule. June 13th through 18th are our half-day schedules and our assessment schedules. And we also have our June 14th, which actually falls on Friday this year because of the way it works, is our senior dinner and awards. Another great night to recognize our seniors. We have a nice dinner here in the cafeteria where the administrators serve a nice dinner. And then we have the award ceremony in the auditorium. With it being air conditioned the last several years, it makes a huge difference. It used to get really hot in here. really quickly, so that's a great thing to have, and a nice benefit for the seniors. The 17th, we have a senior breakfast, which is the following week, that Monday. Again, a nice event, they're going to come in and have a breakfast together. We tried it as we talk about these things throughout the school year, right? Especially for seniors, build that community. So as we start in the fall and we have the senior formal, right, we transition throughout the year, build community events that build that community of seniors throughout the year. As we get to the end of the year, we try to do better at separating a lot of those events so they work more all on top of each other. And again, the senior breakfast is a nice time, very casual, coming in before our graduation rehearsal, get your yearbook signed, get your breakfast, and we'll go into the auditorium for our rehearsal. Graduation is on June 18th. Weather ahead looks good. Keep thinking about that. That's at 6 o'clock. Project graduation at 10 o'clock. Finish up about 5:30 in the morning for our seniors. For that, proud to announce that our alumnus speaker this year is none other than Nick Boyle. I reached out to him several months ago. He's willing to speak for us, and I think it's a great opportunity for our students to hear from a student athlete and really connect with that as well. So last year we had Brigadier General, which is a fantastic job. This year we're looking forward to Nick. Okay.
I'm gonna make an official request that the monitors at graduation somehow face so that we can hear what these people are saying.
Monitors as speakers.
The board sits behind the monitors that face out to the crowd. So
Yes.
we could not, what everybody else does, because we don't have to fix that.
Just, I don't know who runs that
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
but
I'm not sure either. Might want to steal that now. All right, athletic reports. That's okay, Mr. Keeler, continue on to that?
Please do.
Okay. So Mr. Van Orden has given me the updates for the spring season. And golf finished 2-13 for record. Working hard, young squad. Coach Person's working well with them, and they're in great shape for moving forward next year. TJ Bassani finished 5th at the HWS tourney, which is pretty impressive. Shooting 75. I don't know if that's a misprint, but that's usually what I shoot 9 holes. 75, that's right, 75. He's pretty impressive. I think he shot I don't even know what the
A DJ?
Yeah, DJ shot something else, I don't know what it was recently as well, so he's having a great year. Boys tennis is 4-11 for the year. Nikolai Semenko advanced to quarterfinals of the HWS. Boys and girls tracker continue to move on, they're both 6-0. Both captured the league championship. Girls second at NJAC championship. Zoe Tiger broke the school record, 200-meter dash at HWS championships. This last night, they broke the 4x100 school record. Olivia Anderson, Ashley Dixon, Tyra Whipple, and Zoe Tiger. And then they also came first in the 4x400, which is a lot of running time. It's, a lot of them are like right there for school records, even as the year continues on, as they go into states now. So excited to see where that goes as well. Softball, 8-12 record. What happened today actually was they were able to share the 3-way conference title because they did win today. They just got done seeing that. It was a 15-2 game. So congratulations to Coach Seck and the girls for a division crown, although they split it to those schools because of the way that it ended up. Kudos to them. They did lose to Mawa in the first round of the states last week as well. A tough Mawa team. Baseball, 12-7 record. We lost Pope John HWS Finals, one of the best games that I've seen. I had a chance to go to Phillipsburg and watch the game. And I thought it was a very well played game, and we lost in the end to a really good team. But we were definitely deserved to be on the field with them, and we're very close to taking the W. We beat Westwood today in the state opening round, 10-3. We were the number 3 seed in the state playoffs, so we won today, advanced on to play on Thursday. I'm not sure who we play yet. Boys lacrosse 7-8 record. Had a fantastic season. That's the best record in school history for boys lacrosse team. And any of you know anything about sports, it takes a long time to build programs. And 7-8 record for them is a great step in the right direction for them. They had a great year overall. And the girls across 3-12 record did an outstanding game, last game of the year up here on the top field. Finished the comeback winning against Parsippany, down 5-0 at the lead, came back, down 8-3 at halftime, came back, and won to 10-8, so 11-8. So they had a fantastic season as well. Kate Finnegan was just recently honored for first team. I think Lauren Weiss got second team, and some of those got honorable mention. I don't know who's there. But Vanessa Simport got honorable mention. So kudos to them on a fantastic season, and coaches as well for working very hard, being very competitive along the way. I don't think I have anything else.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you very
Well
much.
done.
The next one, curriculum. Tim?
My understanding that public presentations go general until 8:15,
So
so.
you get a lot of extra time.
Just give me 1 minute, I get the time.
I would give them 2.5 minutes.
So, ironically, as I was sitting here and John was, Chitalme was discussing Ray Kay's award today at the county college, I received an email from the mother of a student. It's a student who's had a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges as they entered high school. And they weren't sure whether or not they wanted to come to High Point, and they weren't sure whether or not this year they wanted to return to High Point. And it's about a 14-paragraph letter going on and on and on and on about what Ray Kay has done as a 3-sport athlete senior to help this 10th grader with some challenges. He went to guidance and asked if his schedule could be changed so that he could remain in phys ed class and be his workout buddy. And his mom, the student's mother, got an Instagram account and began to follow her son, and she could just see the chronology of his involvement with her son and his transformation into a student who's doing really well. So it's pretty moving to hear about his personal impact on students. So couldn't be more proud of Ray Kay. We're halfway through the 2-day testing cycle, and it was pretty hectic. Everybody gets a little anxious over every little thing because there's this amped up atmosphere, but things went fine. We had 650 students take 1,300 tests and 100 staff members proctored, and they were all in the caf having lunch by 11:30. So very smooth with all of the little minor issues here and there. It was a very successful opening day. We wrap it up tomorrow, and that's it. So we decided to go late this year after AP testing. Problem is May is pretty intense. The 8th grade picnic tomorrow, career day on Friday. There's a lot going on, but we were focused today. We'll be focused tomorrow, and then we're done with our assessments. So excited Friday to have career day here. Mr. Peraza is going to be a career rep, as is Mr. Dunn. I have a feeling Mrs. Anderson will be here, probably supporting us.
I'm gonna be here too.
Okay, Dylan, thank you.
And it's going to be held in?
The number of
No, I didn't ask.
the number of reps we have, we're going to try and use both rooms.
Good.
We've got about 55 or 60 people coming. Really can't see them, but we began to outline our program of studies in a pathways construct where we show how certain courses link towards certain career paths. So we've given our career representatives a certain distinction. Jane Bond from ESPN, Selected Insurance, Crystal Springs, Comparis Farm and Gardens. We have every one of our pathways. So we have law enforcement, and we have business, and we have education. And we're hopeful that those students in the 45-minute time period will stop and meet and have conversations with 5 or 10 or 15 adults. And we're prompting them to ask those people pointed questions like, how much money can I make in this career? Or how do I get this job? And we hope that it's a rewarding experience for our students. So thank you to those that are supporting it, and we look forward to Friday being really a nice day. We are required by statute on an annual basis to publicly present our annual New Jersey performance report, and that will be this evening. Tomorrow it will be posted to the website. So we receive the data and have the opportunity to review it. We then publicly present it. It then goes on our website, and it becomes it's clearly visible. It's right on our opening page, and it stays there at all times. And if you go to the state's website, you can look going back a dozen years, and you can look at every school and every district. So if you're interested in data, it's worth looking at. Present a little bit of an overview, and I've done this every year now for 3 or 4 years, so I'd like to highlight what our goals were based on last year's results and how successful we were in meeting them. That's last year's report. I try and look at about 100 pieces of data, look at where we did very well, where we've had sustained success, and areas where we clearly need to improve. That's an overview of this year, which I'll get into in more detail. But first, this is what's presently on the website. This is last year's report. And I want to highlight what our targets were last year. Okay, so when we presented the 2016-17 results, we had two goals. One, our PARCC performance needed to go up, in particular in math. Our student proficiency is measured first and foremost by the state assessment, the one that we're taking today. And our goal was to see those scores improve, particularly in math. Second was to see a boost in our career tech path. The number of students enrolled in post-secondary school, the number of students enrolled in 2-year, 4-year colleges, etc. Our PARCC scores went up in both. Our English scores went up, our math scores went up. The subject we targeted, the most focused math course, Algebra 1, I presented before, we had a 102% increase. We more than doubled the percentage of students that were proficient. And that was after a year of piloting the use of data to really hone in on what needs to be taught and what needs to be improved. But our English scores went up as well. We did not see measurable growth in post-secondary enrollment. I believe we dropped from 78% to 76%, so it's about a wash, but we continue to explore how we can link our students to trade school, to career school, to county college, to 4-year schools, and that is something that we're focused on. Strong performance. Math went up, English went up, graduation rate, something that this board and our superintendent is very passionate about, increased, and our summative score. Every school in the entire state gets a summative score, and it's required that they get it by the federal Every Student Succeed Act. And the summative score basically looks at 4 factors. It looks at your graduation rate, your chronic absenteeism rate, and your math and English proficiency rates. And based on those 4, we rose considerably in that area and did fairly well among our neighbors. It's a misleading score, so if you go in and look at our summative score compared to Kittatinny or Chatham or whomever, it measures your growth in those areas. So you could have 2 districts where District A is better in all 4 of those areas, but they improve, etc. Sustained excellence. We still have a vibrant AP program. Our chronic absenteeism dropped, and our student culture is something we're focused on, and our PSAT participation remains at 100%. And those are data points that we've done well at year after year.
Can you give me a quick explanation what chronic absenteeism is? It's not the, don't ask that question?
It's not possible to do a quick.
Okay. It's not the overall student attendance report, is it?
I believe it's the percentage of students that are absent more than 18 times, more than 16 times, and those reports get generated on a monthly basis.
Okay.
So here is the problem, and we have to kind of own this problem, analyze this problem, and attack this problem. Our SAT scores went down. We are already this year engaged in a plan to improve our SAT scores, even though last year I stood here and was quite proud of the fact that it was our 6th consecutive year of our SAT scores increasing. So when I got the scores this year, and I saw that we dropped 33 points, I was befuddled. Because that's quite, last year we increased 22 points, and I was quite pleased with that. 33-point drop, I had to do some digging, and here are a few things to look at. First off, I was relieved to see that that drop was not high point, but that drop was on the macro level. When the state drops 19 percentage points, high point is a small sample size. But when you look at 100,000 plus tests in the state level and you see nearly a 20% drop, you quickly find out it's the result of 2 things. One, in March of 2016, College Board redesigned the SAT, so it's a different test. And second of all, the College Board releases this data. This is not self-reported, and the College Board revised their metric. I believe what they did is they focused more on 12th graders, and they also narrowed it down to only take your most recent test, whereas I believe they superscored it in the past. So a student's SAT data now is simply their most recent, not necessarily their best. And those factors, I believe, I've tried to find more research on a national scale. I've been busy, I haven't, but I think it is encouraging to see that the dip is certainly not exclusive to us. Nonetheless, we want to see rising scores and we want to see that area improve. Here's what we're doing this year and we'll continue to do next year to see improvement. We're using Lincoln. Every 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, and 12th grader, takes 3 simulated language arts assessments per year that mirror exactly what the SAT and MOPARC is, or the NJSLA. And I'm hopeful that the results of the ELA test they took today, for 3 hours this morning, our students took an assessment that we had them take 3 times throughout the year. And we measured it and we looked for growth. And we saw where certain standards were and weren't being met school-wide. We also this year really championed the responsibility of every department, whether it be science or technology, to focus on language arts. And we hope that shows positive results for today's test results and for future SAT results. I mentioned last month that we will be revising our internal assessments. So our quarterly assessments are going to morph back into midterms and finals. And we believe that teachers in collaborative PLCs focused on those assessments, our focus is going to be where in that assessment are the skills measured in the SAT. I don't think that we're unreasonably focused on assessments. I think the SAT has buy-in and credibility. And quite frankly, I think what it measures is, can you read dense nonfiction at a high level and answer reading comprehension questions related to that? That's valid, by any means. So we're focused on it. We hope to see improvement. I think this is significant. Our special education population of 16% has been relatively flat for a decade. However, the percentage of students eligible for free and reduced lunch has increased from 11% to 18%. That's a nearly 2/3 increase in 7 years in the percentage of our students that are economically disadvantaged. You may have heard this. The College Board recently announced in the past week that they're now going to come out with a new SAT metric, one based on privilege. Did your parents go to college? What is the socioeconomic background of your town, etc.? It's quite political, for better or for worse. We know what the Coleman Report told us 50 years ago, which was a groundbreaking Washington study that said the #1 predictor, of course, is socioeconomics. We cannot use that as an excuse. We simply have to accept the reality of we're a comprehensive high school, and every kid counts, every student counts, and we are focused on improvement. I think we will get buy-in with our staff when I show them. Our SATs right now are not in the top, not in the middle. We are behind some of our neighbors, and we don't want to be there. As a competitive person, I want to see us in the top 2 or 3. And so that's our goal. Our goal is to really focus on that and to adjust and to revamp our efforts and to improve in that area. English, we improved dramatically in our freshmen. Our overall increase was a 47% proficiency rate. We have to look at PARC and NJSLA proficiency rates as a scale, not as a 0 to 100 test. Because when the state average proficiency is 46%, it's not, it's a different metric. So we're happy that we improved there. Our math, anchored by Algebra 1 growth, improved. And I'm simply here showing you what will be on our website tomorrow. These are the specific results for all 3 assessments. And visual and performing arts, an area that has been focused on. We, at 64%, far eclipsed the state average and did well there. This is an area where we're stagnant right now. And we want to see more growth in this area. We also know that if 31% of our students are heading to two-year college, we need to meet their needs and prepare them as much as we need to prepare anyone. It's a little letter that goes on the website, and that's the report. So it's very transparent. You can look at any school, and you can look at High Point going back as far as you want, and this will be posted on our website tomorrow.
Did you say there's a link on our website to go to the state?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's actually on this document, the opening page of what I will put out. Just show you real quick.
I'm gonna throw up.
For our performance report, what I do is the opening page is contact me with any questions. Here's a link to look at anybody in the state. Then I give the highlights, and if people want more information, they can come dig in. So, any questions on any of that? All right, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. All right, we want to move on to action items.
Okay.
The first one, curriculum budget.
Yep. The first three items are not action. We have the faculty attendance rate, the student attendance rate report, and a suspension report for April. I'm going to move items 4 through 7. 4 is that the superintendent recommends we approve the harassment, intimidation, and bullying report for April 30th through May 21st. 5 is that we approve the field trips listed on the attachment A-5A curricular. 6 is that we approve the application for the ESEA, the IDEA, the Carl Perkins Career Tech Grant funding for the fiscal year 2020, and upon the award of those grants, we accept the funding of those. And 7 is to approve the 2020-2021 school calendar.
Hey.
Those items. Need a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, roll call?
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Caraza.
Yes.
Ms. Nugent.
Yes.
Mona.
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe.
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe.
Yes. Before we move on to personnel, we have 2 changes that we need to make. Personnel item 6, we're going to table that for now and consider it at another session. And on item 8, we're going to amend the motion. Oh, sorry. If I could back up, I'd like to see if we have a motion to table number 6.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now, on number 8, we need a motion to remove attachment B2B from the items which we're going to be voting on and voting on the remaining attachments. Can I have a motion to remove attachment B2?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. With the agenda being amended, as we just did, Wayne, if you can do personnel.
Sure. So I'd like to move item 1 first, as recommended by the Superintendent Board of Education, accepts with regret the requirement notification of candidate with paraprofessional aid and job coach effective July 1st, 2019. Seeking a second.
Second.
And any discussion?
Hi, Janet. Congratulations. I just want to say that I haven't been in the hallways in a long time, but every year that I was, you were out there with the kids washing windows and sweeping the dust up and working with them and making sure that your students had ethical and work-related skills so that they would come and do their job and be happy and pleasant. And it was a total reflection of how you treated them and how you worked with them. And I just think you've done a marvelous job. I didn't go into your classrooms, you were never classrooming with me, but I watched you work with those kids as a job coach. And I know you rode the buses and went to visit them on job sites, and just amazing.
Congratulations, Ms. Witt. Again, as Ms. Anderson just said, Ms. Witt served as a paraprofessional as well as a job coach. We talk about loving children all the time, and that is something that our special education department, particularly our paraprofessionals, particularly Ms. Witt, do every single day. And that love is the backbone of education, of relationships, and why we want this and believe this to be a special place. And you have played a seminal role in the well-being of the children in your care and all your years here. Our community is better for your having been a part of this institution. It is my hope that you go into your retirement feeling a sense of great accomplishment for what you've poured into others. Thank you and congratulations.
Have roll call vote.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Caraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Dodona?
Yes.
Mr. Ramcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to move items 2 through 5 together. Item 2, recommendation for approval of Adrian Velez as substitute teacher for the remainder of 2018-2019 school year. Item 3 is a recommendation to approve the individuals listed for the extended school year program beginning July 1st through July 29th, 2019, as listed. Item 4 is a recommendation to approve the bus drivers listed during, for the extended school year program beginning July 1st through July 29th, 2019, as listed. And item 5 is a recommendation to approve the bus drivers listed below for athletic trips as needed for July 1st, 2019 through August 31st, 2019, as listed. Seeking a second?
Second.
Any discussion on items 2 through 5?
Item 3, there was a question that I would like to clarify. In the far right column, it says daily rate. That does not mean that, that's just to give you, the board, the knowledge that that is the daily per diem rate for each individual listed. When they submit their payment vouchers, it will be based upon the hourly rate and the hours that they put down on the voucher. The right-hand column is to explain the per diem rate, which is broken down hourly in the hourly rate column by which they will be paid when they submit vouchers. So if you added up the numbers, given the days and hours relative to the hourly rate, it would not equal the daily rate. But the daily rate is there to give you the board the full understanding of the per diem rate. Sorry for any misunderstanding.
Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion on items 2 through 5? If not, roll call.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Caraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Ms. Dodona?
Yes.
Mr. Ramcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll be moving items 7 through 9 together.
Yeah. 8, but
Eight.
we're just
Eight
missing
is
that
again.
one, just, then
Oh,
missing that one.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to read the modification.
Apologies.
That's right. Item 7, the recommendation to approve the revised salaries for certificated and non-certificated staff members for 2018-2019 school year as highlighted in attachment E1, A through F. Item 2 is the recommendation to approve the reappointment and revised salaries for certificated and non-certificated staff members for 2019-2020 school year as highlighted in attachment B2, A through F with the exception of B, which is removed. And item 9 is a recommendation to approve the following 2019 summer custodial workers paid hourly as listed. Seeking a second on those items.
Second?
Any discussion on items 7, 8, or 9?
Just to clarify, we did approve these 7 and 8 essentially last month. The problem was there was some misunderstanding in the MOA between the board and the HPEA.
representatives. And so there were a few salaries and mistakes relative to that misunderstanding. And in those attachments, the changes are highlighted in yellow, so we needed to reapprove them. They are now being corrected based upon the most recent agreed upon collective bargaining agreement.
And that one item B is going to be redone another time?
It's going to be redone another time
Okay.
after review because it has to be negotiated and it's going to be discussed.
Okay.
Anyone else? Roll call.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Mr. Ankliff?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
A yes on 7 and 8 and abstain on 9.
Mr. Caraza?
Yes on 7 and 8, abstain on 9.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes. Okay, extracurricular. Would you do extracurricular?
Extracurricular, sure. It is recommended, you know what, let me start over again. I'm moving items 1 and 2. Items, the resignation of Mike Langan from the volleyball coach and Liana Hennings from the advisor of the yearbook. Item 2 is to approve the extracurricular appointments for the 2019-2020 school year listed on attachment C1, moving both those items. You second?
Second.
Any questions? All right. Roll call?
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Mr. Ankliff?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Caraza?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes. Policy, there's no policies or regulations this time. Negotiations, we met with the HPAA last week. We've reached closer to reaching an agreed upon contract, and we're scheduled to meet again, I believe, in 3 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. And that's the status of the negotiations on the HPAA. Buildings and grounds, there's no items on the agenda. Finance?
Certainly. In finance, I will move items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with a modification of the attachment is simply attachment G5, not G5A, G5B. This is a single attachment. Let's leave it at that. Items 1 through 5. Item 1 is recommendation to accept the report of the Board Secretary and Business Administrator for the month of April 2019. Item 2 is a recommendation to accept the report of the Treasurer for the month of April 2019. Item 3 is a recommendation to accept the report of transfers for the month of April 2019. Item 4 is approving the payment of the attached schedule of audit bills dated May 21st, 2019. And item 5 is a recommendation to accept the agency account, adult education, athletic account, cafeteria account, principal petty cash, school store, and student accounts for the month of April 2019. Seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion on those items?
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Mr. Ankliff?
Yes.
Mr. Morangi?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Caraza?
Yes.
Ms. Nugent?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
And I'll move the final item, 6, 7, and 8 together. 6, there is recommendation to approve an agreement between High Point Regional High School Board of Ed and Camden County Educational Services Commission to provide general services as needed for 2019-2020 school year. Item 7 is a recommendation to grant permission to the Skyland Cycling Club to utilize our senior parking lot for their annual bicycle race scheduled July 7, 2019. And item 8 is a recommendation to accept a grant from the Presidential Innovation Board for Environmental Educators on behalf of Aaron Baker in the amount of $2,500 to fund professional development and activities related to environmental education. I make that motion, seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion on 6, 7, or 8?
Yes. Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
can you talk about number 8 and tell us how great it is that Aaron Baker got that award? Sorry, I just put you on the spot, but I know you can do it.
That's okay. Mr. Baker is a one-of-a-kind educator, and we are excited that more and more of our teachers, realizing that we have a fiscal restraint, are going out and working. It's hard to apply for a grant. I recall Mr. Talon got one 15 years ago for a smart board. You know, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of submitting and losing and submitting and losing. So his persistence is driven by his commitment to his students, and he's doing amazing stuff all the time.
And he gets to decide how that $2,500 is spent in his.
Mr. Drellick and he will collaborate,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it comes up a lot when there's something that our teachers really want, and we struggle with being able to fund it, and then they've got that discretionary amount, so we can then say to them, well, you know, perhaps a portion of that could go towards it. I'm sure it's incredibly gratifying for him when those budget restrictions preclude us from supporting it, for him to be able to step up and say, well, I've got that grant money, and let's do it.
That's awesome. Do you extend our congratulations to him and
I
our
will.
gratefulness?
I will.
Thanks.
Okay, with roll call, please.
Mr. Radcliffe,
Yes.
Mr. Rangi,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Karazin,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Mr. Dona,
Yes.
Mr. Keel.
Yes. Transportation?
Okay, we only have 2 trips to approve, 2 athletic bus trips. Item 1, that's, I'm moving that one.
Second.
Anybody want to comment on that? It's very exciting. Roll call.
Mr. Rangi,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Karazin,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Mr. Dona,
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe,
Yes.
Mr. Keel.
Yes. I'm very happy to state that we have no legal matters to discuss tonight. Correspondence, I don't have any correspondence. A couple miscellaneous items. The annual retirement recognition luncheon will be held at June 17, 2019 at 12:30 p.m. And it's being sponsored by the High Point Education Foundation. The Board of Education would like to acknowledge and express its appreciation for the unanimous donation of the boutonnieres worn by the choir during the spring concert. The Board of Education would like to thank and express its appreciation to all the scholarship donors who provided so many scholarships to our student at the May 15, 2019 Scholarship Awards Dinner. I'd like to add an item on the miscellaneous thing. We've discussed it before, the concept of adding a long-term planning committee. And hopefully the different committees have had a chance to discuss it. And I was wondering if anybody would consider making a motion to adopt the long-term planning committee.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the long-term planning committee.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Do we have a plan of how we're going to make the long-term planning committee? Are you going to ask for people to volunteer? It can't be more than 4, blah, 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 right?
Correct. We're going to look for volunteers, try to limit and rotate each year, and limit the number of meetings. Everybody has a heavy schedule, so we're not going to meet as often. But it's trying to look down the road a little further in hopefully, whether it's finance, curriculum, buildings, facility, and make sure we're considering some of these also keep an eye down the road of what might be done.
Mr. Keel, would that also include, say, consolidation discussions or?
Whatever we would anticipate coming down the road, hopefully the committee would be able to take the lead on that and spread any news they get out to the different committees or anything the other committees get, bring up to the long-term planning committee. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, you take it?
We need a second.
So we have.
Second,
we have
I
a
second it, that's right. I forgot I was here.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Caraza,
Yes.
Ms. Nugent,
Yes.
Ms. Tadona,
Yes.
Mr. Eckler,
Yes.
Mr. Morangi,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe.
Yes. Okay, well then we're gonna move on to public comments. Similar to before, we're gonna ask you to come up, name and address, and we're gonna try to limit it to 3 minutes, if you would, as a courtesy, and also be respectful to everybody involved. There's no limitation on agenda items, anything you want to relate to the board. Is there anybody wanting to make a? All right, seeing nobody addressing the board, non-committee member reports or comments? Seeing no items for the board, non-committee board members or comments? Other business. For purposes of public disclosure, in accordance with the Open Public Records Act, the Hyde Park Regional High School Board Office has received and responded to the following open requests over the past 2 months. This is for informational purposes to show that while we're receiving some, we're responding to them on a timely basis in accordance with the Open Public Records Act.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Thanks. Where it says total district cost, is that something that's charged to a person, or is it an estimation of the cost?
That's just an estimate of the personnel time.
Yes.
The cost of copying, we are allowed to recoup 5 cents per page.
Okay.
And I do that.
Okay. But this just explains how many hours and what that cost would be. Okay.
And regarding that, so when we see TBD rather than 0, it doesn't mean that it's 0. It means that we haven't been able to ultimately calculate the full breadth of the cost that it will ultimately result in.
Okay. And then in next month, when that has been calculated, will that appear? Will the TBDs be removed?
I'll do a rolling one.
Okay. Good.
The legal fees are exclusive to the cost of our.
Yes. They are,
Attorney or.
they're broken down on the bill.
So in the case where it's 0 legal fees, we didn't need to contact our attorney. When there's a legal fee, this necessitated contacting our attorney. I like having this. I like having the fact that we have the date received and the date sent. That's good. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I mean, the purpose of the Open Public Records Act is for transparency, so how much more transparent can we get than to actually show what?
What we're getting, how we respond.
This way it also demonstrates to the board and to the community that should anyone make statements of concern regarding the speed with which they were
I like that.
responded, this demonstrates that we fulfill the requirements in a timely manner.
Thank you. With that being all of the matters, I'd like a motion to move to executive session.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Do we need to read that motion? I
I will read it just in
Okay,
case.
I
Thank
was
you
just
very
gonna say, because that covers some legal.
Okay. A motion will be made that the Hyde Park Regional High School Board of Education enter executive session to provide an update on personnel, legal, and negotiation matters. We are exempt from the public participation pursuant to New Jersey Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, Open Public Meetings Act. Any discussions held by the board which need not remain confidential will be made public when appropriate. Minutes of the executive session will not be disclosed until the need for confidentiality no longer exists. The board will reconvene in public session in the cafeteria annex at the conclusion of the executive session. It is not anticipated that any action will be taken in the public session after that.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?